Something is missing in modern men. Not loud, not obvious, but fading, quietly. The fire, the clarity, the force that once made him feel real. He doesn't scream. He doesn't cry. He simply shuts down, not from heartbreak, not from failure, from erosion. A slow, silent wearing away of something sacred. Not in one moment, but in thousands. The look he avoided, the truth he swallowed, the apology he gave when he wasn't wrong, the day he stopped trusting his instincts, the night he chose peace over pride. Now he walks through life with a question he can't articulate. Not who am I, but why do I feel like I'm not enough? Not for her, not for them, not for himself. This man isn't rare. He's everywhere. He was taught to be kind, polite, passive, to bury his edge beneath softness and sensitivity, to obey instead of lead, adapt instead of assert. And in doing so, he lost something, not masculinity, something deeper, something older, the will to power. What if the woman you can't stop thinking about was never really her? In this video, we'll dive deep into the forgotten truth behind male obsession, Carl Jung's anima theory, Nietzsche's view of feminine power, and how modern culture hijacks your mind without you even realizing it. We'll expose how emotional dependency is created, not by her, but by your own unconscious projections. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand why the obsession began, you'll know exactly how to end it without running from women and without running from yourself. Stay with me till the end. This isn't just psychology, it's a mirror, and it might reflect something you've been afraid to see. Is it possible that men aren't weak by nature, but made weak by design? Nietzsche thought so. He didn't see power as a threat, he saw it as the missing ingredient. A man with strength, clarity, and purpose doesn't fit into a culture built on emotional compliance. So he's reshaped, rebranded, neutered. We call it growth, progress, responsibility. But beneath those labels is fear. Fear of the man who no longer asked for permission. Nietzsche didn't mourn this man. He warned about him, the man who's no longer dangerous, no longer wild, no longer awake, not dead, but invisible, not to others, to himself. This is where the unraveling begins. A quiet tragedy. A man who doesn't know what he lost, only that he was never meant to live this way. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't write about women the way others did. He didn't place them on pedestals. He didn't paint them as saints or sinners. He stripped away the illusions, the morality, the romance, and looked through a colder lens, through nature. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche describes woman not as a companion, nor as a victim of man's world, but as a force of nature. Cunning, instinctual, selective. She is not evil, but she is strategic, emotionally intelligent, survival-driven, a creature designed not by morality, but by evolution's brutal hand. To Nietzsche, woman was not to be idealized. She was to be understood. She is nature's test. And the test is this: can a man stand strong in himself, or will he bend to the seduction of approval, comfort, and validation? She tests the man's will, not to destroy him, but to expose him. Not through malice, but through reflection. A woman who is aware of her power can unconsciously become the mirror of a man's strength, or the scalpel to his weakness. Nietzsche saw this not as cruelty, but as function. She is wired to choose strength, because nature demands it. And when she doesn't find it, she adapts, manipulates, withdraws, or dominates. In Nietzsche's world, the tragedy wasn't woman's power, it was man's softness. He believed the danger wasn't the cunning of women, it was the collapse of men who no longer know who they are without external affirmation. Today, we often view gender dynamics through politics. Nietzsche viewed them through biology, through psychology, through power. He didn't see woman as an enemy, he saw her as a kind of truth, one that exposes the illusions a man carries about himself. The question isn't whether woman is too much. The question is whether man is strong enough to meet what she reveals. He smiles politely. apologizes often, nods when he disagrees, calls it being respectful, calls it being evolved. But Nietzsche would have called it something else, a symptom. The modern man has become tamed, not stronger, not more conscious, but sedated. Not by force, but by slow conditioning. Moral prescriptions, social expectations, endless doses of guilt. He has traded fire for comfort, certainty for compliance, power for permission. Nietzsche saw this unfolding long before it became visible. He believed that society was not elevating man through morality. It was castrating him. Religion preached meekness as a virtue. Politics promised safety in exchange for submission. Education taught obedience as intelligence. And men learned to suppress the very thing that once made them whole, their wildness. Not violence, not domination, but inner clarity, a spine, a presence that couldn't be moved by trends or tweets or the emotional weather of others. Nietzsche believed that man's weakness wasn't caused by women. It was revealed by them. A woman, in his eyes, was not being deceptive when she lost attraction for the agreeable, guilt-soaked man. She was being honest, responding to biology, to instinct, to something deeper than logic. He believed that woman, as nature's agent, does not reward the man who hands over his soul to win her affection. She rewards the man who keeps it. Look around today. There's a generation of men confused about what they're supposed to be. They're told masculinity is toxic, yet blamed when they're passive. They're told to be vulnerable, but mocked when they crumble. They're expected to lead, but punished when they assert. So what do? They perform. Performative feminism, over-apologizing, masking resentment with niceness, outsourcing their emotional backbone to their partners, hoping, quietly, desperately, that compliance will be enough. But deep down, it never is. Because the moment a man abandons his will to power, his core direction, his self-possessed strength, he doesn't become lovable. He becomes replaceable. Nietzsche didn't hate the modern man. He pitied him. Because this wasn't just weakness. It was a betrayal of potential. And betrayal, as Nietzsche knew, doesn't need an enemy. It only needs a man who forgets who he is. There's a moment, quiet and personal, when a man sees a woman and thinks, she's different, not like the others, not like the rest. He doesn't fall for her, he falls for the idea of her. Nietzsche saw this as one of the greatest distortions in the relationship between man and woman. Projection, the elevation of woman into an object of worship, into something divine, flawless, untouchable. He warned that when men put women on pedestals, they aren't honoring them. They're abandoning themselves. To Nietzsche, this wasn't romance. It was a surrender, a man projecting his anima, his inner feminine, his emotional and spiritual longing, onto someone outside of himself. Jung later echoed this idea. The anima isn't a person, it's a psychic imprint, a symbolic image that lives in the unconscious of every man. When he hasn't integrated it, when he hasn't faced the feminine within, he projects it onto women. He doesn't see her as she is. He sees her as he needs her to be. She becomes a savior, a healer, a goddess, a cure for everything he's never solved within himself. This projection is most obvious in modern culture. In the world of porn, women aren't people. They're avatars of fantasy reduced to visual stimuli. On social media, the algorithm feeds illusions, flawless faces, curated personalities, affection without reality. And then there's the parasocial trap. A man becomes emotionally attached to someone who doesn't even know he exists, a creator, a model, an actress. She becomes his, not in reality, but in his mind. In all these cases, the same mechanism is at work. Woman as mythology, not as a flawed, living human being, but as a canvas for male longing. It feels romantic. It feels deep. It feels like love. But it isn't. It's dependency. And it turns women into symbols of salvation, while turning men into shells of selfhood. Nietzsche believed this kind of worship weakened both genders. It trapped women in roles they didn't ask for, and trapped men in needs they refused to outgrow. Pedestals become prisons. and men are the ones who build them. Because to project the anima is easier than integrating it, easier than facing the chaos within. But the moment you place her above you, you are no longer whole. You're a fragment, waiting to be completed by something that was never meant to complete you. She doesn't break him. She reveals him. Nietzsche didn't see woman as a deceiver. He saw her as a mirror, a living reflection of a man's inner truth, his strength or his weakness, his clarity or his confusion. To Nietzsche, this wasn't cruelty, it was function. A woman doesn't invent a man's failure. She reflects it, not with intention, but with presence. She senses, almost instinctively, what's real and what's hollow. And she responds to that, not always with words, not always consciously, but through energy, through pull, through withdrawal. When a man is weak, when he's uncertain of who he is, when he needs validation more than he needs purpose, she doesn't destroy him. She simply shows him what he cannot yet admit to himself. And that's why so many men turn bitter. Not because they were rejected, not because they were wronged, but because in her eyes they saw the part of themselves they were trying to outrun. Modern dating culture is full of this. A man chases a woman not out of self-possession, but out of emptiness. He performs, he adapts. He gives her the version he thinks she wants. And when it fails, when she walks away, he's left not just with heartbreak, but with exposure. She didn't betray him. She reflected him. Some women do manipulate. Some use emotion as leverage, affection as currency. But Nietzsche wasn't speaking about individuals. He was speaking about nature, about dynamics that exist beyond personality. A woman cannot nurture the strength that a man refuses to build. She cannot feel safe with a man who is not rooted. She cannot respect a man who is emotionally unstable and spiritually ungrounded. The hatred some men feel toward women is often hatred toward the reflection they showed them. And the wound isn't external, it's internal. The mirror didn't break them. It just made them look. Nietzsche believed that not all morality is noble. Sometimes it's a disguise. He called it slave morality, a mindset born from weakness, not strength. It doesn't come from the powerful asserting themselves. It comes from the powerless trying to justify their condition, turning failure into virtue, turning resentment into righteousness. And nowhere is this more relevant today than in the modern relationship dynamic. Many men have been taught that to be good is to be soft, to avoid confrontation, to never lead, never assert, never desire too strongly. They confuse emotional exposure with emotional clarity. They mistake the avoidance of offense for moral superiority. In the name of empathy, they become hollow. In the name of support, they become spineless. Then they wonder why their relationships fall apart, why attraction fades, why respect vanishes. And when it does, they don't look inward. They point outward. They say, women don't want nice guys. They say, she used me. They say, all women are shallow. But Nietzsche would ask, did she reject you, or did she reject who you chose to become? This isn't a defense of cruelty. It's a rejection of false virtue. Many men don't realize that their performance of goodness is still manipulation. They trade authenticity for approval. They believe that self-erasure will be rewarded with intimacy. It isn't. Resentment grows not because they gave too much, but because they expected something in return. Something unspoken. Gratitude, validation, love. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Slave morality hides a dagger behind a smile. It plays the victim while secretly craving power. In relationships, it appears as emotional weaponry, guilt as leverage, self-pity as a tactic. This is not masculinity. It's a cry for control dressed in virtue. The modern man must understand this. You cannot guilt your way into love. You cannot beg your way into respect. And the longer you wear weakness like a badge, the more you bury the part of you that was born to lead, to build, to rise. Nietzsche didn't despise the weak. He despised the lie that weakness was moral. Because that lie doesn't just destroy love, it destroys the man. Nietzsche never said, fix women. He said, transform yourself. His solution wasn't blame, it was becoming. The core of Nietzsche's philosophy is the will to power, not the lust for domination, but the inner force that drives a man to rise, to create meaning, to carve order from chaos, to forge identity, not borrow it. This will isn't aggressive, it's sovereign. It doesn't scream, it stands. It doesn't beg, it builds. A man guided by the will to power doesn't seek approval. He doesn't outsource his self-worth. He doesn't measure his masculinity through validation or victimhood. He becomes dangerous, not in violence, but in presence. Not a threat to others, but to his own mediocrity. To Nietzsche, true masculinity isn't loud. It's rooted. It's clarity under pressure, direction in confusion, depth in a world that only offers distraction. Modern men are starving for that transformation, not to dominate women, not to reclaim some outdated power fantasy, but to reclaim themselves from apathy, from guilt, from the hollow performance of being nice. This is where Stoic strength and Nietzschean fire meet, where a man stops asking, "What should I do to be loved?" and starts asking, "Who must I become to respect myself?" This is the path of individuation, shadow work, discipline, building something, not just in the world, but within. A man who knows his chaos and carries it with control, who doesn't fear rejection because he no longer fears himself. He doesn't need to control women because he no longer depends on them to feel whole. He becomes the kind of man nature respects and woman responds to, not because he chases her, but because he's walking his path with such force. She feels it. The dangerous man is not cruel. He is simply awake, and that alone makes him rare and unstoppable. Every man at some point meets her, not always in the flesh, sometimes only in thought, in a memory, in a longing he can't quite name. She appears as the answer, the resolution, the one who will finally make it all make sense. But she isn't the ending. She's the beginning. She was never sent to complete him. She was sent to reflect him, to show him what he hasn't yet become, to illuminate the cracks in his character, the hollowness in his identity, the unspoken truths he's buried beneath performance and politeness. Nietzsche didn't say women were the problem. He said they were the mirror, the test, the revelation. A man doesn't fail because she rejected him. He fails when he demands that she fix what only he can face. The journey isn't about changing women, not about understanding their nature so he can win them, keep them, or decode them. It's about understanding why he needed her to save him in the first place, why he built his worth on her approval, why her silence could shake his foundation, why her love felt like the only thing that could make him whole. That's not her burden, that's his wound. The feminine cannot carry what the masculine refuses to build. The woman every man chases in dreams, fantasies, and fears. She isn't a destination. She's a mirror of his unmet self. And until he sees that, he will keep chasing, keep falling, keep resenting. The cure doesn't begin with her. It begins the moment he stops asking to be completed and starts completing himself. She can't save him, and she was never supposed to, but she can awaken him if he's ready to rise. If something in this story felt uncomfortably familiar, don't ignore it. That obsession wasn't love. It was a call from the part of you that's been waiting to be reclaimed. You don't need her to complete you. You need to remember who you were before you handed your worth to someone else. If this message shook something in you, then you already know. This wasn't just a video, it was a mirror. Now the question is, what will you do with the reflection? If this spoke to you, share your thoughts below. Someone else might need to hear them too. Subscribe for more journeys like this. Deep, uncomfortable, honest. And leave a like if you felt it. This is not the end. It's where your real story begins.